Hello, my knitting friends. Today I want to show you how I knitted this applied double knitted button band. It's so beautiful from the inside and the outside. Matches your personal style, and it's actually, if you know how to, quite easy to knit. Let me show you how to. Before we start picking up stitches for our button band, we have to make a little gauge swatch. Why is that important? Because we have to match the height of our cardigan. So let's say this is my little swatch. I knitted 10 centimeters or 4 inches. So this will tell me how many rows I need to get my 10 centimeters or 4 inches. This is how you count your rows, because in double knitting you basically knit 2 rows. One back and forth counts as 1 row, because we're actually creating rows in the front and on the back. So what you do is you'll just count the little V's like you would in regular knitting up to your 4 inches. And this tells you how many stitches you have to pick up. But let me tell you, if you're using the same yarn weight, I think the best thing is, that's what I usually do, I pick up 1 stitch for 1 row. And now let me show you how I do this. First of all, I determine where I want to have my buttons in my cardigan. So good thing is to put the first button not too close to the button band or to the ribbing, because you don't want to overlap the button. So you want to put it usually like an inch above, and then you can take an open marker and mark that spot on the side of your cardigan. So when you pick up stitches later on, you'll count the rows, and then you put a marker on your needle so you know, okay, I've reached the marker, it's time for my buttonhole. In the beginning, I assess it like this. So I put my markers where I would like to have my stitches, roughly. And then in the end, it's quite important that you have the same stitch amount between all your markers for each buttonhole, so you're exactly the same in the same position. Okay, so we've talked about this. Now it's time to pick up stitches. So we said we want one stitch per 1 row. So first of all, we need a circular needle with a quite long cable, because we have to make sure we reach around the whole cardigan until to the other side. So this has to be a quite long needle. Sometimes you get like cable connectors, and you can make your cable even longer if you connect 2 cables. So this is my needle. I usually go down a couple of sizes. This is knitted by, I guess, let me see, US 7. I've knitted the whole cardigan US 7. And I'm actually gonna use for my button band US 5 needle. So this is 3.75 millimeters. Okay, so we're starting picking up stitches. What I usually like to do, I love my crochet hook to pick up the stitches. So with working yarn and my crochet hook and the right side of my cardigan, because the Kaya cardigan, I decided to put my buttonholes on the right front and the buttons on the left front. You can do however you want, but if you decide to put them on the other side, you first of all have to knit the plain button band and then start the buttonholes on the other side. So we're gonna have them on the right side of our cardigan. So leaving a tail long enough to weave in later, I'm starting with my crochet hook because I want to make sure, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, to make sure I'm starting at the very edge of my project. So first of all, we have to identify where that is, and this is going to be, let's see, there's this little corner, and I think I want my first stitch to be right here. I'm gonna crochet 1 stitch. And if I want a stitch each row, so as you see, this is my knit stitch. And you have all these little bars. So each bar means 1 row. So I have to pick up stitches in between these bars to get 1 stitch per row. So I get my next stitch between, and I crochet another stitch and another. I have 3 stitches. I am going to discard my crochet hook and I'm going to start knitting with my needle. Put the stitches on. So from now on it's quite easy. I just go on and pick up my stitches. And let's say you want your buttonhole to begin here. So I'm going to pick up the stitches until that point. Let's say we want it here. I'm just going to place a stitch marker on my needle. So that tells me, attention, we need a buttonhole right here. So I'm just gonna keep on picking up stitches and I'll meet you in a second. So I picked enough stitches to at least get 1 buttonhole. You see, I put the marker where the buttonhole begins. And now we have to imagine that I reached around the whole cardigan, over the neck, down to the bottom on the left side. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to break my yarn, leaving a tail long enough to weave in ends. I break it. Now, I'm going to pull my cable through and push all the stitches right on the needle tip at the very bottom of our cardigan where we start picking up our stitches. So from now on, I'm going to call this my cardigan needle, and let me introduce you your buttonband needle. Okay, so now we have to cast on stitches for our buttonband. You know, like these 17 stitches, we're going to cast on this needle, on the the buttonband needle. We always cast on an odd amount of stitches because we want to start with a knit stitch and end with a knit stitch. So it's always even. I'm going to cast on using the Italian tubular cast on because I think for me it's the most beautiful cast on for such a project. And you'll see it in so many different patterns that the designers use that cast on. So why not learn it with me? And it's quick and easy, and it's only 17 stitches. Okay, I've prepared, I'm just gonna move this a little bit away so you see what I'm doing more clearly. I'm going to use a DPN needle because we cast on only 17 stitches, so we don't need an extra cable. It's quite easy if you have your DPN at hand. So 3 times the length of your project, usually we say, so 17 stitches. I think this is like 20, like 7 inches would be more than enough for 17 stitches. You're gonna start like you start in your long tail cast on. You take the yarn coming from your ball over your index finger, over your thumb, and gather it in your hand. So you have this little slingshot. Now I'm going to come from above, go under, twist the needle, and this is going to be my first stitch, and it's going to be a knit stitch. So we're going to work an odd number of stitches, 17 all together. This is a knit stitch. The next thing we need is a purl. So what you're going to do is, remember, when you purl a stitch, your working yarn should always be in front of your work. And if you knit a stitch, working yarn should be always behind your work. So what we're going to do is we take our needle, go under the working yarn on the index finger, over the yarn on our thumb, and pull the loop on the needle. So when you look closely, you have a little purl bump created on your stitch. Next stitch is going to be a knit stitch. So you have to go under the thumb, over the index finger, and pull your stitch. And when you look again, you see this looks like a little V stitch, like a knit stitch. So we have 3 stitches. We go underneath the index finger, going over the thumb, and create a purl stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. We go under the index, under the thumb, over the index, and create a new stitch, a knit stitch. Go under index finger, over thumb, a purl stitch. Under the index finger, the purl. Sorry, now I got confused. Under the thumb and over the index finger. Under index finger, over. Under and over. So let me see how many stitches that is. The best thing, I always stretch them out a little bit, as you can see. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's the purl. So we go under the thumb, over the index finger, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and the last one, it's 17. So we started with a knit stitch and we ended with a knit stitch. Now it's time to turn your work around. And usually what I do, at the very beginning, I really hold on to the tail. And now it's time to pick up our work, because from now on we're going to use our cardigan needle. The best thing always for me is take your time, organize yourself, get everything in order so you won't get confused, you know where's everything's coming from. And so we've got it all set. And I told you the first stitch was a knit stitch, so it's going to be a purl stitch on the wrong side. I bring my yarn to the back of the work, in front of the work, hold on to the little tail so I won't lose it, because the first row is always a little tricky. I'm going to slip the first stitch as if to purl, yarn in front of the work. You put the yarn in the back of the work and you're going to knit a knit stitch. And as you can see, the very first row created, let's say, a twisted knit stitch because the leg is on the back side of the work. So we have to knit it as if it's like an SSK through the back loop. But I promise you it's going to be like this only in the first row. So we're gonna knit it through the back loop, slip it. Now next stitch a purl. We're gonna slip it as if to purl, yarn in front, knit, and slip, and knit. And this is going to be our pattern for the whole of the button band, because the Italian tubular cast on is nothing other than double knitting. For the Italian cast on, we only use a couple of rows in double knitting, but in double knitting, of course, we're just gonna continue the same pattern until we reach the very end of our project. So all you have to remember from now on is slip the purls, yarn in front, and knit the knit stitches. I'm gonna do this until the very end of the row. Because in the beginning, don't worry, it's gonna be a little fiddly, but yeah, the last 2 stitches, I'm gonna knit it through the back loop and slip the next stitch. And now I carefully turn my work. And now we're beginning officially to attach the stitches to the cardigan needle. And this works like this. I'm gonna knit the first stitch, slip and knit, and slip, knit, and you get the feeling what's happening here. So we're gonna work in the same fashion until one stitch of the end of our button band needle. So we're gonna work 16 stitches in pattern, and then we're gonna connect the button band with our cardigan needle. So we've reached the last stitch. You can see there's a little gap between, so they're not connected yet. And now we're going to knit the last stitch, the 17th stitch, with the first stitch on our cardigan needle through the back loop. We don't have to remove our slip stitches like we do when we do it in SSK. We're just gonna knit them together through the back loop. Very easy. And now carefully turn your work. Just gonna get the other end of the needle out of the way. And so we've knitted the last 2 stitches, or the last and the first stitch, together through their back loops. Now on the other row, on the wrong side, we're just gonna slip that stitch as if to purl, and we knit the next stitch, and we continue until we reach the end of the row. And then we're gonna turn. I'm gonna show you once more how to connect the 2 needles, the button band needle with the side of our cardigan. And the more you work your way up in the pattern, the easier it becomes and the more stable the whole thing gets. In the beginning, it can be a little bit irritating, but don't you worry, you'll make it. So knit the first stitch, slip the next stitch, and I have a little tip for you as well. In the beginning, the corner sometimes gets a bit weak. So this is the way to tighten it a little bit, because the next knit stitch on your needle, you can pull it a little bit. So you pull a little yarn from that stitch over to that stitch, you knit it, you slip the next stitch, you knit it, and you pull a little tighter on your knit stitch, and you knit it. And so you move the yarn from this side to the other side, and the stitches become a little bit more crisp. So I slip, and I knit, and I slip. And this is a lot of fun. It's basically like almost knitting like a super wide I-cord. That's basically what it is. Okay. almost there. I knit and I slip, and we've reached the last stitch of our button band, and we're going to knit it together through the back loop of the last and the first stitch on our cardigan needle. Knit it through the back loop and take it off the needle. And carefully turn your work. Slip the first stitch. It's like the knit two together stitch. And then knit the next stitch, slip, and knit, and so on. I'm just gonna go ahead to the beginning of the next row, and I'm showing you again how to make a crisp edge stitch. So slip and knit and slip. So the last stitch on the wrong side, the slip stitch, don't try to pull it wide, and just go very carefully and just slip it. So don't try to stretch that stitch so much. And now you're going to knit it even without stretching it. Take off the needle, then you slip the next stitch. Then the next knit stitch, I'm just pulling here a little bit on the front leg, knit it, I slip the next stitch, and I pull on the front leg of the knit stitch, and I slip it. And you'll see it starts to become a really nice and beautiful edge. Sometimes you kind of have to maneuver your stitches in the very beginning, but you'll get the hang of it. And I'm just gonna finish my row. I'm gonna knit through the back loop, and then I'm going to knit up to my marker, because there's nothing more happening than knit the knit and slip the purls. So now the last stitch, let me see. So now we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, so 16. And the next 2 stitches we're gonna knit through the back loop. I'm gonna enter like this and knit the 2 stitches together and turn the work. And now you can really see how the thing is happening. The stitches, it creates like a little seam. In the end, we're gonna just pull all the ends, and now you can really see it's beginning to look a lot like a button band. So I'm gonna work my way up to the marker, and I'll show you how to do the actual buttonhole. So I finally reached my marker, and as you know, here's the buttonhole is going to start. And now this is what we do. For the buttonhole, we always work in 2 pieces. I didn't weave in the ends here yet, so don't mind the little ends. But we're gonna knit first. First we knit the right half and then the second half of the stitches. And then in the very end we knit all over the 2 parts, and then it's going to be one thing again. Okay, and this is how we do it. I'm on a right side row now. I'm going to knit, because we have 17 stitches. We're gonna divide it into 8 stitches and 9 stitches. The first half of the buttonhole is going to be 8 stitches, And the rest of the second part is going to be 9 stitches. So this is how we do it. Knit the first. It's basically the same thing, but we don't finish the row. We stop after 8 stitches. So 1 stitch knit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. Now we're going to turn the work. It's basically like a short row without the short row. Okay, so, and from now on we're gonna continue in the established pattern. First stitch is a knit stitch, and we slip and we knit and we slip. The pattern will tell you exactly how many rows you're going to knit to match your button. Let me show you one more time. This is my button, and I have to make sure that the button, of course, fits the buttonhole. It shouldn't be too loose and not too snug, so it should go through with a little resistance so you won't lose it or it won't open up while you wear it. So you have to measure it first, and then you have to play around, or in the pattern, if you follow the instructions, it's gonna tell you exactly how many rows to knit. For this kind of button, for my button, I decided I need 4 rows in double knitting, meaning 8 rows back and forth. So I'm going to show you the next row, and then I'm going to finish, because it's basically the same thing all over. Knit the knit, slip the purl, knit the knit, and so on and so on. Knit stitch and the purl stitch. Going to turn my work, go back and forth, and I'll see you when I'm finished with this column. I finished my 8 rows, and now all we need is one more right side row. Gonna slip and knit, slip and knit, slip, knit, and slip. The beauty about double knitting is that the inside, as you can see, has that beautiful edge as on the outside. So there is nothing you have to sew in later or close. It's just a perfect tube. So now, I told you we're gonna knit in 2 pieces. You're gonna cut the yarn to long enough to weave in ends. And we're gonna start the second half of our. There is another way you could use that you don't have to cut the yarn, and you work with a yarn over, which seems in the very beginning like a very good idea. You don't have to sew in your ends, but let me tell you, sometimes you maybe miscalculated your buttonhole like a teeny bit, and your button's going to slide through too easily, and it is too big, your buttonhole. So what you're gonna do, or the options you have, if you have a tail, you can, in the very end, can close the buttonhole with the tail, and it gives you the freedom to nudge a little bit, or maybe you want to use a different button, so you can close that buttonhole a little bit. So sometimes it's worth the effort to use or to leave behind a little tail of yarn, or sometimes maybe one stitch doesn't look so good. You can do close it using double duplicate stitch. So don't you fear and don't you worry. Cut your yarn and go on, pick up your new working yarn, leaving a tail long enough to weave in the ends. And we're gonna start our second half, the second column of our buttonhole. I'm just gonna hold on the new yarn and the old yarn so I don't get loose stitches. So I'm gonna knit the first stitch, and the second half of our buttonhole is an odd number. So we have the same thing as in the beginning. We have a knit, and we will begin with a knit, and we're ending with a knit stitch. Knit and slip and knit and slip. And of course, for the second half of the buttonhole, we have to knit together the last stitch with the stitches on the cardigan needle. We didn't do this on that side because we didn't have to, but now we're gonna knit to the last stitch in pattern. I'm gonna slip that stitch just for a second so I can remove my marker, put that stitch back on, and knit it together through the back loop with a stitch, the first stitch on your cardigan needle. Okay, and you turn your work, and here you go. You slip the first stitch, you knit, you slip until the end of your second column, being very careful because you've got some loose ends to manage. Last stitch is a slip stitch, and of course you can see how it loosens up, so I pull it tight, being careful not to lose anything. Turn my work and knit the first stitch carefully. Give a little tug to your yarn end. Where is it? It's here, little tug. Maybe you can even still hold on to it so you don't lose it. The next stitch is a slip stitch. And you go on in the same fashion as you did before. The only difference is when you come to the end of the row, you're just gonna knit the last stitch with the first stitch together and turn your work. So now I'm just gonna finish my 8 rows, the back and forth rows, and I meet you at that point where we connect the both columns. I've knitted my 8 rows ending on the wrong side. Now, again, I need one more right side row. Gonna knit and slip, knit and slip, and we're gonna connect both columns on the next wrong side row. Okay, knit 2 together through the back loop. Now you can see the buttonhole. Perfect. Turn your work. On the wrong side, from now on, we're gonna connect the both columns. Slip and knit and slip the stitch after purl. Now you have to be a little careful. Knit and slip, because the next stitch is a little loose because you have a loose end there. So this is going to be a knit stitch, then a slip stitch, knit and slip, and knit and slip. Okay, turn my work, and from now on we can continue in the same fashion as we did in the beginning, slipping and knitting our way to the very end. Just being a little bit mindful the little connection here, because in the corner in the middle, sometimes the last stitch or the first stitch from the second column is a knit stitch, and sometimes it crosses the next stitch, the pause stitch. So don't get confused that you want to work this stitch and instead of this stitch. So be aware, we slip this stitch, next stitch is a knit stitch, and knit a stitch, and then you're safe from now on, because now we've established the button band once again until the very last stitch, and you're gonna knit it through the back loop. I'm gonna show you, put it down, and this is how it's supposed to look like. Let's try if the button fits, and it fits perfectly. It has a little resistance, but not too snug, so you could be happy. And now you're gonna continue until you will reach your next marker and so on, create another buttonhole. What I will do is now I'm gonna continue a little bit more in just plain button band, and then of course I have to show you how to bind off in pattern, because we started with using the Italian tubular cast on, and we're going to use the same method to cast off our stitches so both sides look alike. See you then. I've knitted a little bit further, as you can see, and now let's pretend we've reached the far corner at the very end of the left side of our cardigan. This is one stitch left on our cardigan needle, and these are the 17 stitches that we used for our buttonhole. I've ended on the wrong side of the work, and now to finish this, I'm going to knit once again in pattern to one stitch before the end of the button band stitches. Now you know what I'm doing. I'm slipping and knitting, so I'm gonna be a little bit faster so you can see this is also a very fast way to knit it. It doesn't have to take super long. This is a very good thing to do, called mindless knitting sometimes, if you knit the button band. Okay, so we've reached the last stitch of our button band and the last stitch of our cardigan needle. We're gonna knit it together through the back loop. We are turning the work one more time, and we're finishing that row as established. And this is going to be our last row, because we can start binding off on the next row. And you remember when you start or you're binding off using the Italian tubular bind off, after you're ribbing you have to do 2 more rows in knit one, slip one. So we don't have to do this because we've done it all the time. And now we're ready to bind off in tubular, Italian tubular bind off. So this is what we've got. We're pretending this is the very end of our cardigan. And now what I like to do, and this is actually my favorite way of binding off my stitches. I'm looking for my second double pointed needle. Usually I like to use 2 different DPNs because it helps me to remember, because I want to put the knit stitches on one needle and the purl stitches on one needle. So I know that, let's say the dark the knit stitches go on the dark needle, and the purl stitches go on the gray needle. It doesn't matter, the second needle doesn't matter, it doesn't have to have the same size. It can be smaller, but it should never be bigger than the one you actually used. If it's smaller, it's easier because the stitches slide more easily. So I'm gonna use, as I said, the dark needle for the knit stitches. I slip the knit stitch, then I use my light needle and slip the purl stitch. So, and now I go back and forth, 1 and 2, slip the knits, slip the purls, slip the knits, and so on. So this gives me a very good overview when I'm binding of the stitches, because sometimes it can be so irritating when you do the whole thing on one needle and you don't know where you are, which stitch is the next stitch, the last stitch is a knit stitch. So now I discard my knitting needle, my cable needle, and this is actually the beauty of double knitting, because when you pull the stitches apart, you can see it creates a gap. So it's like basically like we've knitted in the round. So now we have to use Kitchener stitch to close this opening. We're gonna put the stitches back to the front. We're gonna cut the yarn 3 times the width of your project. So this is like this little button band. So I think like 8 inches will be enough. I'm gonna break the yarn, and all I need is my tapestry needle. I'm going to thread the tapestry needle, and here we go. Let's take a close look. First, we have to secure the stitches, the first stitch on the front needle and on the far side needle. Here we see knit stitches, so we're gonna secure them using a purl stitch. We go inside the stitch, pull the yarn through as if to purl. We go on the back needle. Now we do the opposite, because you see it's a purl stitch. We're gonna secure it as if to knit. Pull the yarn through. Okay, now they're safe. Now, usually we go 2 times through each stitch before we release it, okay? So now to release a stitch, we have to do it in pattern. So this is the knit stitch. We're gonna go through the stitch as if to knit, and now it's ready to slip off the needle. We don't pull too tight yet, we do it later on. So we're gonna secure, because we've taken 1 stitch off, now we're gonna secure as if to purl. Now we move to the back needle. It's a purl stitch, so we're gonna go through as if to purl. And now this stitch is ready to be taken off. Next stitch needs to be secured as if to knit. Pull the yarn through. Then the stitch on the front is ready to be taken off as if to knit. Take it off the needle. Pull the yarn tight a little bit, not too snug. Next stitch needs to be secured as if to purl. Going to the back needle. Take it off in pattern, meaning you go through as if to purl. Take it off the needle. Secure the next stitch as if to knit. Bring the yarn forward. Go through the front needle as if to knit. It's ready to be taken off. Pull it a little tight, not too tight. You can fix this later. secure the next stitch as if to purl, go into the back needle, take the stitch off in pattern, so you do as if to purl, you pass it through, take it off the needle, secure the next stitch as if to knit, take the stitch on the front off as if to knit, take it off the needle, pull the yarn, and now you can see it forms already this beautiful edge like we did in the beginning. Next stitch needs to be secured, put it through as if to purl. On the back needle, we want to take off this stitch as if to purl, take it off, secure the next stitch as if to knit, bring the yarn forward, take the front stitch off, as if to knit, take it off, pull the yarn. Now, secure, as if to purl, go to the back, take the stitch off as if to purl, secure the next stitch as if to knit, take off the front stitch as if to knit, take it off, pull the yarn through, adjust the tension, now secure as if to purl, going to the back needle, pull the yarn through as if to purl, take the stitch off, secure the next stitch as if to knit, take the stitch of the front needle off as if to knit, and secure as if to purl. Now you can realize there's a little pattern to the whole thing. And take the stitch off the needle as if to purl. It's going to be a mantra. And now there's only one stitch, there's two stitches, so we're going to secure the stitch as if to knit. We're going to take off the first stitch as if to knit, remove it, pull the yarn, and now we only have two stitches on our needle. We're going to secure this stitch as if to purl, and the last stitch on the back needle is now ready to be taken off as if to purl. We remove the needle. So usually we would have another stitch to secure. So what I'm going to do now, because on the back side we secure always as if to knit, so I'm going to pick up a little thread on the cardigan side and just pull the yarn through as if to knit. So we're pretending that it's a stitch and pull it through. Then we're going to move to the front, going through that stitch as if to knit. We discard the needle, pull the yarn through, and now, as you can see, we have two matching ends. Isn't that beautiful? We turn the work, we can weave in the end at the back side or in the inside carefully. And the beauty about the double knitting is you go inside the fabric between the two sides, pull the yarn through, because it's double-sided, so this thing is going to be trapped in. I pull a little bit more, so when I release it, it disappears inside of the fabric. Usually when I do this and I weave in ends, I don't like to cut a blunt cut. Usually what I do is I'm kind of scraping the yarn, so it gets a little bit frizzy in the end, as you can see here. And when I'm gonna pull it in, it will, we don't like that usually, but it will felt inside its little trap. Okay, so this is how you finish it. And now we're gonna check our button once again. fits in perfectly. And now all we have to do is weave in the ends here. And that's, as I told you, you can adjust the size of the buttonhole if you want to. You could pull it tight and then I thread it. And if it would be too big, you could maybe close this little area and you pretend doing like a duplicate stitch. I'm going through like this. And then I'll look for another stitch, pull it through. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go inside, hide it inside there. I break the yarn the same way as I did before, and then it's going to be invisible. And since I created a little edge, you can see it's a little bit tighter now. So this is a very good trick to close your buttonhole a little bit in case it's been too big for the button, because sometimes you don't know, you don't get the gauge right or whatever. We've seen it all. So I'm gonna cut this, I'm gonna scrape it off again, move it to the inside, maybe this little fuzz I'm gonna cut. So, and here we go. And this is how you do an applied double knitted buttonhole. Where's my little button, my beautiful button? This is how you do it. Happy knitting.